Hello and welcome to the webinar today, how to implement and grow high-value accountancy services. I'd like to say hello to my guest, Steve Major.
Thank you, Matt.
No problem. Thanks for coming along. So, yeah, thanks to everyone for attending today. We'll get kicked off in just a minute. So, yeah, obviously the title tells you what we're going to be talking about today. And I think this is going to be a fascinating webinar in that you're obviously hearing a lot for several years about compliance is dead, dying, um, whatever, and you've got to move to value add business advisory services. Um, but what I think's missing from that conversation a lot of the time is how that's actually going to happen. So I'm really delighted to have Steve along, who's both done that in his own accountancy practice and worked with a whole bunch of firms, helping them move away from I guess a traditional model to a really profitable and kind of modern accounting firm. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you're having any problems, just use the chat window or ask a question, and I'll make sure we sort that out for you. So if you have any technical problems or anything like that, if you have any questions for Steve, fire those into the question window. Possibly we'll answer those as we go, but more than likely we'll go through those at the end. So we're going to stick around and answer some of those questions at the end of the webinar. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Steve, and he's going to talk about yeah, implementing and growing high value accountancy services. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. And firstly, I must apologise for my voice. I've just come through a bit of an illness, and the legacy of it is at the moment that my voice is not sounding the best. So it's not your audio system that's playing up. So we'll get into this topic because it's something that fascinates me. And as Matt said, we've heard so much about compliance is dead and where we've got to go to next and all the rest of it. And we know that regulatory authorities around the world are looking at how to streamline compliance, but who knows exactly what that's going to look like. I don't believe that my crystal ball is any better than anybody else's, but I think there's a real opportunity though for accountants, and we'll talk about some of the why the opportunity is there primarily because of technology that is enabling us to do things so much easier, so much better, so much quicker than maybe we could have ever done in the past to be able to really help small business. And I think that's where the opportunity is. So looking at it in that positive mindset, that's really what I want to have a chat about today. And as we go, fire any questions. So pricing power is the name of my business, but I just wanted to talk about what the word actually means. And it is an economics word, but it's the ability to get the price you deserve for the value you create. And unfortunately, too many accounting firms are just not achieving that. They might be creating reasonable value. I think they can create phenomenal value for their clients, but they're not necessarily getting paid the price that they deserve for that. And I think there's a whole host of reasons why that might be the case, but really that's my objective, is to help firms provide that great value and at the same time achieve that you're getting high prices. That means high profitability, that means better cash flow, that means better freedom out of your business. So that's really the end game here, but it all starts with value, and that's what we're going to probably spend the most of now. So just quickly, what we'll cover today, I'm going to talk about what I believe clients are really wanting. I think there are 3 stages of moving from information to transformation. I'll make sense of what that sentence means when we get to it. How to start implementing these high-value services, communicating the value of these services, and then how to price these services. I know there's a lot of other topics we could cover, but in this webinar, hopefully we'll be able to hit these points and make sense of the real opportunity that is there for you. Firstly, let's have a look at 3 strategic challenges that are out there for the accounting advisory industries. You could probably use 13, you could probably use 33, but I think there's probably a big 3 to really consider. One is technology, and I use that in the challenge here for the minute, but I think it is also the opportunity. There is no doubt that technology is just radically transforming our landscape in the accounting industry from what we could, do just only 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm not just talking about the incidence of cloud that's happened. I'm talking about all of the other ways of communicating. I'm sitting in Australia, Matt's in New Zealand, and we're talking to people here today from various parts of the world. Not that long ago, that sounded pretty crazy to even think about. So the communication, the applications that we can have in our firm, the applications that clients can use in their business, that has totally transformed. And I know I'm not saying anything new, but I think what is not properly grasped is how that is actually changing the relationship with the client. It used to be that the client would send their work in, the accountant would do their work and send it back. Now we have this ability to nearly, you could say real time, have insight into the numbers of the client and be able to communicate at the drop of emails. There's all the various other applications. So technology is radically transforming, and it's a challenge, it's also an opportunity. The Big Four. I think this is the one that is quite interesting to look at, is just what the traditional Big Four accounting firms, where it used to be the preserve that they would be the large end of the town was their clients, maybe the big medium businesses, but all of them in different ways are investing hugely into technology and platforms to be able to really reach down and deliver a service offering into that small and medium business market. And they're not just putting little money, they're putting huge dollars. They're not just doing it from an accounting, they're also looking at it from the business intelligence or the KPI reporting. You only need to just go on and have a look at, pick any one of them and have a look at their websites and have a look at what they're doing there. I think that suddenly a competitor that most small and medium accounting firms have never had in a practical sense is suddenly now on their landscape. And exactly what that's going to look like, who knows, but I think there's a reality of it. Now, the third strategic challenge, I think Matt will like, outdated marketing. I think it's the one that we're so used to, an old style, shall we say, of how the accountant finds a new client or attracts a new client, but there are so many opportunities now, and obviously BizInc's all about being incredible online, and the big thing that I see that really frustrates me in this outdated marketing is that accountants don't stand for anything, is that they're not focused and narrow in their niche, in some area of specialization, and then everything permeates throughout the rest of what they do. Their website, maybe what they publish, where they speak, what meetings they go to, all the rest of it. Outdated marketing means that they just end up looking like any other accounting firm. So I think they're the big 3 strategic challenges out there. I know that there's a whole host of others, but if you just look at those 3 and then look at, well, how can we work around that? Too often firms are just saying, we're so busy with compliance, and I know they are, we'll deal with this later. Or sometimes, unfortunately, technology is the answer to everything. I just need the latest app, the latest platform, whatever, and technology is only part of it. Technology is just the tool. It's nothing more than that. A fantastic tool, but that's all it is. Maybe they say a few superficial changes to marketing. Maybe we should join the Chamber of Commerce or something. Maybe we do a refit of our website, but still it looks like everything else. And too often that's the responses we're getting. And I know I'm sounding harsh, but it's just, it is frustrating that that's what too often I see. And as a result, we go back to that earlier point, they're not commanding the prices they deserve from their business. And it's because they're just providing information. And I think that's where the trap has been for accountants, is we've been very good at providing information. We might call it tax returns, we might call it financial statements, we might call it GST, VAT, whatever other tax obligation. But at the end of the day, we've been very good at just providing information. And as that has got more and more automated and will continue to get more and more automated, well, there's increased price pressures. But taking that information and doing something with it, that's where the real opportunity sits. So asking a question here, if you think about what is the real product of accounting firms? And before we answer that question, let's just think of Disney. And I know it's a big company and most of the people online were small businesses, but just for the minute, humor me and we'll think of a big business like Disney. What's the real product of Disney? They've got incredible movie house, they've got incredible theme parks that are world-renowned, and an amazing business. And the real product of Disney is memories. And that's not just some wishy-washy mumbo-jumbo. Yes, I am an accountant, but it's the reality. If they focus everything about their business is about memories that they create. So I took my children to Disneyland there in LA in 2008 when they were all, the oldest was 12 or 13. I know that they'll talk about that for years and years to come, probably for a long time. It's those memories that count, and they'll probably want to take their kids in some future point in time. The point is memories. So what's the real product of accounting firms then? Too often, as we said earlier, it's all about information, and it isn't. The real product is a transformed client. And again, I'm not being touchy-feely here. What clients are after is to grow their business, to improve their lot, and that is what accountants can do. A transformed client is the real product of an accounting firm. So let's just drill into that a little further on what they really want. And I saw an interesting Facebook post in a business group just recently that so highlighted this. This was from an owner of a business turning over several $1 million, where she was asking for recommendations for an accountant to help them make informed decisions about growing the business. And at the end of the day, that's what clients want. They want help to make informed decisions. They're not after you as an accountant for the greatest entrepreneurial advice. They're after you to give the insight and the assistance to make their business run smoother, to make certain that they're making the right decisions about how they're utilizing their resources, what they're investing in, what growth looks like, where should they be. A transformed client or a transformed business is one that is generating that quality of life, just like we want the accountants. It's the one that's generating that quality of life for that business owner. This is what clients really want. They want help to make informed decisions. And we can do it. That's the crazy part. It's just that we've been so locked into this providing information bit. So now that we know that that's what I believe, and the evidence is crystal clear, that vast majority of clients are wanting help to make informed decisions, let's have a look at the 3 stages of moving from information to transformation, because that's what we're talking about, is a transformed client. Joseph Pine, an author, wrote the book Experience Economy, talked about that we're in the current world of beyond the experience economy into what's called the transformation economy. And what that is all about is that we're helping transform the business where the customer becomes the product. That might sound a little bit sort of crazy, but let's just drill into that a bit further. Now, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but let's just try to work through it in the blue section first. That's the information that we're so used to at the moment, the data, the compliance aspect of what we're doing. Now, you'll see the word automation there, and what I'm talking about there is there's some phenomenal applications, and I'm not going to name names, that are great, and as accountants we should help clients implement into their business. But all they do is make better compliance. They don't transform the client. They make it more efficient, but it's really just better compliance. So if you stay down in that information sector there, that blue tier of working with clients, that's where the price pressure is. That's where the greater competition is. That's where the reality is, who knows exactly what it's going to look like, but technology's having a massive impact. So let's look at the green section, which a lot of accountants are moving towards, but I think they missed the real game here. And that's the interpretation. So suddenly we're taking the numbers. We might be utilizing a fantastic app to do some great KPI reports. The firm might even be working with some clients on cash flow forecasts. But the highest level of interpretation is what are the real critical indicators for that business. There might be, usually is in the business, 2 or 3 indicators that are absolutely key lead drive indicators for a business. Now, when the accountant is working with the client on these interpretation type services, at least we've moved significantly out of information, but we're still not at where the real game is. The top level, the red level, is where I think the real opportunity sits, and that's where you're helping businesses generate free cash flow. It's taking the interpretation and now making some changes and course of action. It's making decisions about business growth. It's providing insight into what they should be doing. So I know we don't have time specifically now to go into exactly what that really can look like. That's what I work with clients on. But the point is seeing how we're moving from information through interpretation up to transformation. If you want to put an analogy to it, you could see that information is, shall we say, the old traditional accountant. Interpretation might be maybe the outsourced CFO type services. And the transformation is like being a strategic board member on their company. I would prefer that top level. That's where the real opportunity, the real enjoyment, the real profit sits. I'm not saying it's not without some difficulty to make all that happen, but that's where I think the real game sits for accountants, is being able to head into those top tiers of providing that transformation. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of making that happen. And the first point that I really want to come up is they don't name what they stand for. So you can't do this for all businesses. It's just impossible to be able to say, I help all small and medium business or all small business. You've got to be able to firstly narrow who you want to work with. So you want to do this transformation type services, these high value services, but who? What do they look like? What's the commonality about them that you want to deal with? See, clients don't hire you for everything, but they hire you for something. And you just need to know what that something is. You need to be able to clearly articulate it. We know the power is with the specialist. We know that from any field that you look at. And we need to know exactly who we want to work with. but also means narrow is not the same as small. Narrowing the focus of what you do does not necessarily equal to very, very small business. To put it at the extreme, there's a law firm in Manhattan, Watchell Lipton, one office, that turns over $700 million and focuses heavily on the financial sector. And in the 2008 crisis, had to get permission from the Secretary of Treasury in the US so multiple firms could use that firm. That was because they're specialists. It's certainly not the same as small. But who are you working with? It doesn't mean that it has to be an industry either. That's the other automatic, is that we think of just that it's being maybe the motor vehicle dealer industry or the construction industry. An industry is good, but it's not the only way to narrow the focus. I know one firm that only works with businesses that have inventory in excess of $1 million, because they know then that usually inventory management and knowing the right numbers and all of that system around that, they can really make a huge impression. So it's not an industry, but they've identified that they have a set of skills. And yes, they do all your standard compliance work, but they'll also work heavily to how to manage that aspect of the business and then create free cash flow and all the rest of it. So they're very clear on who they're working for and very clear on who they're not. If we're looking at implementing high value services, we've got to know exactly who we are working for. And then that can permeate everything on your marketing, on your website, all that, your presence anywhere else. Everything that you're doing is you're writing and you're talking about the problems that are particular to that type of customer. Their problems, you know them inside out, and you can then stand out in that market. So determine who you're going to serve. And then really, really, really understand your target customer's problems. It's often time that we rush to think that we can solve everything as an accountant. I think it's our personality type or our training. But the reality is we've really got to take the time to really understand that group's problems. Once we've worked out who we're going to serve and what's going on in their world, then we can narrow that ultimate product offering, exactly what transformation services will look like in our firm. And there's many different ways to skin that cat. There's many different options, but you need to be able to determine exactly what you will and won't do, where you will head into, and what that will look like. Step 4 in implementing this is develop an onboarding process. This is another one that I could probably speak for an hour on, but an onboarding process, it's usually a word that's often associated with tech companies, but I'll just explain what we're talking about. There needs to be a process of how, when a client or potential client expresses interest in what you do, from there to the first 90 days, exactly what happens. And too often, accountants are in a rush to sign them up. Let's get going. Let's get started. But the reality is we need to slow it down. We need to go through exactly a value conversation. Then we need to do what you could call a demonstration phase, so that you start talking about what you could actually do, but it's not yet a proposal. And then the third step could be a proposal, which has got 3 options, and I'll come to that in pricing in a minute. But and then there's a how to gain commitment. But there's a clear, defined onboarding process that allows any red flags to be eliminated on the way through, to ensure that both sides are very clear of the scope. Step 5 is we document all these processes, the product offering and the onboarding process. And then step 6 here of this implementation is we utilize project management. When we're doing high value added services, we can't use timesheets. And I know that's a big topic in and of itself, but we've got to have the approach of this is a project we're working on this client with every month, every quarter, every 6 months, whatever it might be. And we look at it, what are the resources that need to be done, what are the outcomes to be delivered. We are delivering outcomes when we're looking at these high valued services. We're not completing tasks. It might be that there's a monthly meeting with the client. It might be that there's a review of their files done by somebody in the office every 2 weeks. Whatever it might be, but each project will have some different aspects, and we need to be viewing it of what are the outcomes that that customer is expecting. So that's quickly as an overview some of the steps that we need to look at to really get going in this implementing high valued services. And there's an awful lot I appreciate underneath all that, but hopefully that gives a bit of a snapshot of where we're trying to move towards. So let's quickly talk about some of the communicating the value of these high value services and what might be some of the questions and topics here. Firstly is we need to be asking the right question, not what do you need. If we ask that question of a potential person, all we're going to get, more often than not, is an answer about some sort of information. But the question that we need to be focusing on is what are you trying to accomplish? Go all the way back. The transformed client is really what is the important aspect. And therefore, we need to be wanting to know what they want out of their business, where they want to go, what are their objectives in that business. And then we can determine what role our firm can have in helping them accomplish that. There'll be things that are very clearly outside of our expertise and scope, but there will also be very clear signals from asking these type of questions as to what they see as valuable. So when you're wanting to understand value, this sort of framework to think about, and that is that we need to understand the problems that they've got. What are the implications of those problems? We need to ask questions around this. And on the flip side is that success. What outcomes are they wanting? What results are they wanting? Is it significantly improved cash flow? Is it to grow their business by 50%? I don't know. I'm just throwing things out. But really, before we can start talking about the value of what our transformational or high value services are, we need to understand their world first. We need to understand what they are wanting out of it, what they are wanting to achieve. Just excuse me while I get water. It's only when we've taken the time to do that can we start talking about the value of what working with us will be, because it's going to be connected to these outcomes, connected to solving these problems. That's where value always sits. It's not saying the value doesn't sit in the sense of we'll meet with you once a quarter. The value sits in that we'll be able to take the information through meeting with you once a quarter, sit down and help you achieve these goals of growing your business, getting free cash flow, whatever it might be. But the value doesn't sit in the physical task. The value sits in the outcomes. Oops. So quickly having a look at pricing these services. And then when I finish pricing, I want to wrap back up onto some of what the transformation services might look like. So just to put some context. So pricing these services. Well, I can tell you when we're doing high valued services, you're not pricing it by the billable hour. It's connected to value. So it's got nothing to do with the time spent. When we're transforming businesses, as grandiose and as high objective as that might sound, we are not doing it on some notional hourly rate that we catch up with, every so many hours a week or month or whatever it is. It's outcomes focused, and thus it's got nothing at all to do with time. And pricing these services has nothing to do with time. Because at the end of the day, you are what you charge. As crazy, as uncomfortable as that comment is, it's an absolute reality. If you want to come across as the run-of-the-mill, average, routine information providing accountant, well, charge like everybody else. You are what you charge. Now, an objection to that statement often made to me is, oh, my clients won't pay. And I'm going, well, they won't pay for exactly the same service that they can get somewhere else. Absolutely, 100% agree, because pricing is always in context. We always look at prices and make some sort of comparison to something. It's just the reality of how pricing psychology works. So if we're allowing our firm to be compared to other firms down the road, across the state, across the country, because our services look exactly the same, well, then our prices are going to be the same. But we need to stand out. We need to be the one who, for argument's sake, is that firm focusing on businesses with inventory at a certain level that is then helping those businesses utilize those resources in a lot better fashion. There's very few accountants doing that. It's not saying that others couldn't do it, but there's very few that are standing out and making that a point of difference and talking about it and getting known for it, and then going, well, that's hugely valuable, and that could add 200, 500, whatever thousand to the cash flow of the business, then our fee is worth it. So the point of it is that these services have got nothing to do with time, but we need to understand that when we're pricing these services, context matters. Clients will be making a comparison. We just don't want to be compared to somebody else, which gets me onto just a little quick topic as a sideline, but very quickly I want to cover 3 packages on a website. Seeing so much of accounting firms doing that. And usually the packages are heavily compliance orientated or information orientated. And all that does is allow comparison between firms. The real value sits in this transformation, or at minimum the interpretation. So why are we wanting to belittle that and put it up as 3 commodity type packages? I mean, all things aside, and as I speak to you, I'm using an Apple now. Apple have been phenomenal in their pricing strategy of being able to significantly differentiate themselves, no matter whether you're talking the computers, the iPhone, the iPad, whatever it might be. But they've been able to significantly set themselves apart and price themselves accordingly. I know they're a huge company, but there's no reason why small business can't do exactly the same. So we need to remember another aspect of pricing these services is that we need to price the customer. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have 3 or 4 or a handful of core options that most clients end up being presented to, and I'll come to that in a tick. But at the end of the day, is I don't think we should limit or put a prescriptive price on these services. We should remember each customer is different. As an accountant, we have that relationship. It's a core aspect of our business. Tech companies with their various cloud applications, they don't have the relationship that we have, and yet so many accountants are trying to copy that business model and just put 3 options up and 3 fixed prices. I'm going, you've got the relationship with the client to know that to this client, this package A, B, and C is worth whatever the price be, but slightly modified packages to another customer have a different price point. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, because remember where we started, we always started with value. Everything resolves around value. And if we always have that in mind, we've got to work out what is of value to this customer and then what is the price accordingly. So price the customer. Never forget the opportunity that we have in pricing the customer. It's a huge opportunity that we have, and I think accountants, are crazy to neglect the fact that because of it, we can achieve premium pricing. As I said, the key is value. So on the screen now, you'll see a slide that says costs never determine price. And yes, I'm a chartered accountant. Yes, I'm speaking to accountants. Yes, that statement is 100% correct. That doesn't mean that there isn't a benchmark below which, that we're not going to go because of a deemed profitability. That's not what that statement says. But when we come to pricing these services, the fact of whether it's going to take one person 6 hours, 6 months, 6 days just does not come into it. The customer doesn't buy the service because of your costs. The customer buys the service because of the value being delivered, and the price needs to measure to that value, not measure to the cost. Too often, and I think it's symptomatic of the timesheet in accounting firms, we get caught up in this cost accounting mindset, and therefore we go, it's going to cost X, we'll put on a deemed profit margin, and that will be the price. And it's nothing like what the price should be. 99 out of 100 times firms that are doing that are underpricing the service, which takes me back to that comment earlier, you are what you charge. If you want to have ideal clients delivering these high value services, then you need to charge accordingly. You are making a huge difference. It's got nothing to do with your costs. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of pricing then. You need to have 3 options. There is no ifs and buts. You must have 3 options. It's the simplest pricing tool out there. It's the most effective pricing tool that an accounting firm can have, is that you have the absolute Rolls-Royce of transformation services, exactly what you would love to do, and then you strip away certain elements of the value to get to the lower options. But you must have 3 options. There has been so much research that has been done in the services, professional services and other services market that show that 3 options significantly improves the likelihood of people becoming customers. So when you're putting a proposal to a customer, you must have thought about the absolute Rolls-Royce and then how could you strip it away. Now, crafting options, there are many different aspects that go into determining what goes into a package and what doesn't. But I just want to sound a little word of warning when we're crafting options here. Too often accountants, we're so used to our time being the most valuable resource, or that's the perception. So accordingly, we do different options based on different amount of partner or principal manager or senior people's time involvement. And that might be appropriate, but it is not universally appropriate. It is often the one that we go to. I often see that the Rolls-Royce it's got a monthly meeting, and the next version down has a quarterly meeting. But we've got to go all the way back to what was of value to the client. They might be just so busy. The situation might be such that they're not going to get any extra value out of catching up with you, whether it's via technology or in person, every month versus every quarter. It's not an automatic assumption that more of your time equals a better, a higher value option. There can be other aspects of what you do that come into this aspect of, maybe there's more education on what the various ratios and KPIs and all of that aspect means, more education to their team on maybe financials. And I'm just riffing here, but the point is that sometimes we get taught in this trap of just looking at the time as the extra thing. So I'll give an example of an architect, just to be somewhere totally different industry, but to illustrate the power of this. So an architect, obviously, you would think about that, can they actually put a design and scope, etc., of a building of that type of building category? What's their experience? What have been their other buildings they've done? All of that aspect. Now, there's an architect firm that focuses on the education market in Australia. Just a one-office firm, but very, very successful. And how they are achieving a significantly higher price than most other architects and are so busy is that they are saying to the end users of these buildings that we will help educate you on how buildings interrelate with the latest education methodologies. And that education aspect that they've been able to put in heaps and heaps of videos and tutorials and workshops and all the rest of it, which is once I've done it once it's done, it gives them on average, they attribute about a 25% price premium over other architects. It's not necessarily that their designs are better. I'm not an architect. I couldn't answer whether they are or aren't. But the end users see value in understanding this interrelationship between the building and the latest education methodologies. And as a result of which, they are achieving a price point. So it wasn't more time by a principal architect or it wasn't anything like that. It was coming at options in another way. I know that's a little bit long-winded, but I just wanted to really highlight that this trap that we often fall into of crafting options based on more time. It's not always the way. So when we're presenting the three options of these high-value services, exactly what they might look like in your firm, we need to talk about them from the top down. And I'll use the word sell. I know it's a word that we in the accounting profession aren't comfortable with sometimes, but what we need to talk about is the Rolls-Royce version first. We need to talk about what the perfect, the absolute best option of our three options is. And then we go, okay, that's the best. The second best is this. The third best is this. We don't just send a proposal to a client via email or whatever and wait for them to return. We present it, whether you do it electronically or face-to-face, and you talk of it through from the top down. So that's from the highest price down. It might be the one that's 10 grand a month, 2 grand a month, whatever the magic number is, and then the lesser one, and then the lesser one again. But you start at the high point and come down. Now, too often people think, what's the logic of that? And they automatically go to, you're actually trying to sell the middle one. And I'm not here. That's for tech companies on websites, applications. Their pricing methodology is to sell the middle option. But when we're in accounting, we need to be trying to convince clients to take the top option. We need to show that it is such great value that the other two pale in comparison. Because we want that ultimate transformed client, and therefore we want as many as possible in that top option. But if we start talking about it from the bottom option and go, well, the bottom one's X dollars a month, and that's what we do. Then we've got the next one, and then here's the ultimate package, and we do all this. But we've already set in their minds what that bottom package was. We've already preconditioned them by going, here's the lower one. And it's a simple little technique. It's not manipulation, because at the end of the day, everything that we're about starts and finishes on value. But you must be communicating it from the top down. So when we're talking about these services, we've got to be able to provide what I call a value story. We've got to be able to explain why this is so powerful to them. We've got to be able to paint a picture of what could be the place that their business could go to. I know us accountants, we love numbers. And I don't care if you use the story in numbers. And I know we're not giving guarantees here, but you must be able to talk to where they want to go. When you're talking about that Rolls-Royce version, you've got to be able to paint the picture of what it looks like, of where they want to go to. You can nearly say it's a performance in a sense, but you've got to be able to show them where they're heading to. There is a story. You've got to be able to help them see that story of what you can do by working together. And then there's the other tool that I use and work with firms to create is what we call a value model. If you could graphically represent the value of working with you on your top product offering in some sort of quick graph. Now, what you see there is an example graph that created for another business, and there's a story of what the red, the green, the blue mean. The person sitting down in front of a potential client can talk about the journey, and there's a quick graphical representation. So if you can have some sort of graph around your options, it shows the higher the value that is possible by working with you. So I know that I've done covered a whole heap of stuff today on information to transformation. If anybody wants to know a little bit more and book a session with me just to have a further chat, there's a link on screen now, pricingpower.net/strategy session, which is where we talk about how to make this a reality in your firm. So the question that I want to ask of you is, how can you transform small business? Everybody will come at it from different angles. There'll be different aspects of what you want to work with. And I talked about earlier of free cash flow. It's something that from my days of having my own practice, what I really focused on working with businesses was not just how to improve cash flow, but to ensure that the cash flow, there was free cash flow being thrown off the business. Now that was my sort of angle in my practice. You might have a particular different emphasis of how you can transform small business. But there's no doubt that being stuck in the information services of data and compliance and the latest app or whatever, that's where the low money is. We need to be able to get out of that and start looking at these higher value and looking at specifically what you can do to transform small business. So that's the question that I want you to really think about, is how to move out of this information trap, I'm calling it, even beyond interpretation, into actually helping your clients make informed decisions about their business. So Matt, I'll hand back to you a minute just for questions and comments, but and then I've got a couple other points just in closing I'll probably make.
Oh, great. Thanks very much, Steve. That was fascinating. I think I took a lot away from that, and so I hope everyone who's come along did. If you have any questions for Steve, use the question window, and we've got a bit of time now to ask those. I've got one from Kerry here, which is and he asks, is value pricing limited to business advisory services, or will it extend to compliance work?
Fantastic, fantastic question. I think there's a couple of points to be made here. One is that the there's a trap of mixing what well, Tim wrote a book, and I'll paraphrase his words, mixing magic work and logic work. So the logic work is your compliance work. The magic work is this transformation stuff, this making sense of the numbers, helping them with the insight. And the trap of mixing the two and then trying to price it as one package is that we end up depreciating the magic work. So I often find that what works really well in accounting firms is that they may have two or three packages for the compliance work that in essence is fixed priced. It's not truly value priced. It's fixed priced, it's priced higher than maybe average, but the customers, of that firm are only there because they want the other services, they want the magic services, shall we say. Now, can you value price compliance work? Yes, you can. If you're a compliance only firm, I think very hard. I think the impact or the benefit comes when you are doing that magic work, shall we say.
Yeah, great. Keep firing your questions in. I've got a quick question, Steve, which is let's use that term, magic work, and you said that the price has to reflect the value of that advice that you can give, that magic. I would say that certainly thinking that from my own point of view, we could maybe give bit of advice to a client that might make them, $5,000 or 50,000. I don't know. How would you price something like that where there's an outcome and you can be pretty sure it's going to be a positive one, but very hard to quantify?
Okay, so value is not a number. So that's the one that us accountants fall into the trap. I think you're okay, Matt, not being an accountant. But we fall into the trap is that we always want to try to quantify value. And sometimes it can be quantified, but oftentimes value is not a number. So when we're looking at outcomes, what's the value of peace of mind? There is absolutely no doubt that part of the element of the relationship with the client accountant is peace of mind. But I might put X dollars on it, and you might put a total different number on it, Matt. So the point is that value is not a number. So how do we price it? Now, because we're always pricing everything up front, that's a key aspect. We're not pricing it afterwards when we've achieved that 500,000 bottom line or 50 grand additional sales, but we're always making it in reference to when we're pricing. So price is both an art and a science, and the art aspect of it is testing. Sorry, the science aspect of it is testing, is that we need to understand that this package really does deliver a lot more leads to their website. It does help their profile. Does that equate to 100,000 or 200,000 to their bottom line? Well, that's hard to definitively quantify, but we do know that it brings a greater presence, brand, etc. Um, is that worth 5 grand or is that worth 50 grand? That's where we need to have those value conversations and test accordingly. Um, and I know that that's sounding nearly inexact, but that's what pricing is an inexact science. And but we've got to, the usual rule of thumb that I tell most accountants is whatever you're thinking, double it, because accountants are notoriously at low pricing. And if they're thinking of 3,000 a month for a client, make it five. 9 out of 10 times, it won't be a drama. As long as they've answered that first question, as long as they've taken that point of understanding value and worked out what really are the drivers for that business.
Okay, yeah, great. Um, well, we haven't got any more questions coming through, so did you have a few more words that you wanted to wrap up with?
I just wanted to really go back to, just bear with me as I quickly flick to this. Um, the in conclusion is the high valued services need to be really focused on that insight aspect. Now that I think accountants find really exciting and really scary. They go, what gives us the right to be able to, talk to successful entrepreneurs about their business? They're the ones that have built it from often zero to, you know, whether it's a million or 10 million turnover, and what gives us that right? And I can tell you the answer to that question is the fact that we have an understanding and a training and a knowledge base in making sense of those lower levels, of making sense of those numbers. So too often, I think us accountants, we're very diminish our own skill sets as an industry of what we can really add. Those entrepreneurs are great at their particular business and have that entrepreneurial intuition. And what you're coupling with it is that help to make smart decisions. So don't be fearful of it. Attack it, because that's where the real opportunity is.
Yeah, that's great, and I'd certainly say from my own experience of being an entrepreneur, um, you know, the success that I've had, I've always had, well, not always, but I've sought out good professionals, particularly accountants, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs would say the same. So I think there is a huge amount of value there. Um, that peace of mind, the just steering a business to make correct decisions. A lot of entrepreneurs lack that experience, so that there is incredible value there. And I think people, well, I don't think I know people are very willing to pay for that.